What does freedom really mean if one is always confined? In the realm of criminal justice, the concept of freedom is both complex and paradoxical. Imagine a prison system where walls do not solely define the boundaries of freedom. This is the core idea behind open prisons, a revolutionary approach that redefines the traditional norms of incarceration. Open prisons, unlike their conventional counterparts, offer a degree of autonomy and trust that challenges our typical images of confinement. In these facilities, inmates are not kept behind towering walls. Instead, they are allowed to work, receive education, and even visit their families under certain conditions. This model shifts from punitive isolation to rehabilitative trust, aiming to prepare inmates for a smoother reintegration into society. This innovative approach questions the very essence of freedom and confinement, highlighting a stark contrast between open and closed prison environments. Now, journey back to where and how this transformative idea began. The roots of open prisons stretch back to the early 20th century. In a time marked by rigid penal systems, the United Kingdom pioneered a revolutionary idea during the 1930s that would reshape the landscape of rehabilitation. This concept was the open prison, an establishment that diverged sharply from the traditional notions of incarceration. It was within this context that HMP Ford, the first open prison, was established. Situated amidst the serene Sussex countryside, it embodied a radical new approach to the treatment of offenders. The cornerstone of HMP Ford, and indeed of the open prison philosophy, was trust and rehabilitation rather than mere confinement. The inmates selected for this program were primarily those considered low risk, with a focus on preparing them for eventual reintegration into society. The founders of HMP Ford believed that by reducing the physical restrictions typically associated with conventional prisons, inmates would develop a greater sense of personal responsibility. This in turn was expected to aid their transition back into the community, reducing the likelihood of recidivism. The environment at HMP Ford was less restrictive. Prisoners were even allowed to engage in work, which was both a rehabilitative tool and a method to teach them valuable skills for life outside the prison walls. Moreover, the open prison model was seen as a more humane approach to incarceration. It recognized that many prisoners would eventually return to society and sought to prepare them for this inevitability in a constructive manner. This was a stark contrast to the punitive atmospheres of traditional prisons, where harsh conditions often led to hardened criminals rather than rehabilitated individuals. The success of HMP Ford set a precedent, demonstrating that open prisons could indeed work. It was not long before other countries began to take notice. From a single facility in England to a worldwide movement, open prisons began to reshape incarceration. As the concept took root, the serene landscapes of Scandinavia became fertile ground for this revolutionary idea. In the mid-20th century, countries like Sweden and Finland began experimenting with open prisons, adapting the model to suit their unique societal and legal frameworks. Sweden, known for its progressive approach to social issues, saw open prisons as an opportunity to focus on rehabilitation rather than punishment. The Swedish system emphasized the importance of preparing inmates for reintegration into society. This meant not only providing them with work opportunities, but also ensuring access to education and healthcare. The goal was clear: reduce recidivism by treating inmates with dignity and respect. Finland followed suit, integrating open prisons into their criminal justice system with a similar ethos. Finnish open prisons operated on the principle that freedom and responsibility could coexist, even behind bars. Inmates in these facilities were often allowed to work in the community during the day, returning to the facility at night. This level of trust was groundbreaking and set a precedent that many found hard to believe. The success of these programs in Sweden and Finland did not go unnoticed. Other nations began to look to Scandinavia for guidance on how to implement similar reforms in their own systems. The ripple effect of Scandinavia's success was palpable, as country after country began to see the value in a system that rehabilitated rather than simply punished. The success in Scandinavia paved the way for open prisons to gain legal and social legitimacy. As the concept of open prisons grew, so did the need for legal frameworks. In the tapestry of criminal justice, legal milestones are often the threads that strengthen the fabric of innovative concepts. The journey of open prisons from a mere idea to a legally recognized institution is one of progressive legislation and human rights advocacy. International human rights organizations have played a pivotal role in this evolution. By the late 20th century, these bodies began to advocate more vociferously for prison reforms, emphasizing rehabilitation over punishment. Their reports and recommendations provided a moral and ethical framework that influenced several countries to rethink their correctional systems. In Europe, the Nordic countries were trailblazers. Norway, for instance, integrated the concept of open prisons into their legal system as early as the 70s. The Norwegian Correctional Service operates under the principle that life inside should resemble life outside as much as possible. This philosophy is enshrined in their laws, which focus on preparing inmates for a smooth reintegration into society. Legislation supports low-security facilities and grants prisoners the opportunity to engage in work, education, and other social activities, mimicking the freedoms of the outside world. Denmark followed suit, with legal reforms that expanded the scope and capacity of open prisons. Danish law emphasizes the treatment of prisoners with dignity and respect, ensuring that their conditions of detention encourage personal responsibility and social rehabilitation. These laws also facilitate a system where inmates can spend parts of their sentence in less restrictive environments, provided they demonstrate good behavior and a commitment to reform. The legal frameworks in these countries not only formalized the operation of open prisons but also encouraged other nations to adopt similar reforms. As laws evolved, so did the perception of open prisons, transitioning from experimental facilities to integral parts of the national justice systems. With legal backing, open prisons became a viable alternative, setting new standards in the justice system. Fast forward to today, where do open prisons stand in the global justice landscape? Open prisons, a concept that once stirred considerable skepticism, now play a pivotal role in the correctional systems of numerous countries across the globe. These facilities, characterized by minimal security and greater freedom for inmates, focus on rehabilitation rather than punishment. In India, the open prison system has flourished, showcasing the country's progressive approach to correctional reform. Facilities such as the Sanganer Open Prison in Rajasthan allow inmates to work outside the prison walls, engage in community activities, and even live with their families in provided housing. This model not only aids in the smooth reintegration of inmates into society, but also significantly reduces the cost of incarceration. Across the Atlantic, the United States has been more cautious, with open prison concepts often limited to minimum security facilities. However, states like Minnesota and California have experimented with less restrictive environments that emphasize vocational training and education, aiming to equip inmates with skills necessary for post-release success. Northern Europe continues to be the stronghold of open prison success. Countries like Sweden, Norway, and Finland have long embraced this model, with a strong emphasis on human dignity and social rehabilitation. These prisons have no conventional security devices, and inmates are often engaged in work and educational programs that connect directly to life outside the prison system. Despite their successes, open prisons face significant challenges and criticisms. Security concerns remain paramount, as the freedom afforded to inmates can lead to escapes and public safety risks. Moreover, the public's perception of justice being too lenient on offenders can influence policy decisions, often hindering the expansion of these programs. Nevertheless, the evolving landscape of open prisons reflects a broader shift towards understanding and addressing the root causes of criminal behavior. By focusing on rehabilitation and reintegration, these institutions challenge traditional notions of confinement and punishment. Despite challenges, open prisons continue to offer a glimpse into a possibly more rehabilitative form of justice. As we explore the corridors of open prisons, we revisit our initial query about the essence of freedom. The journey through the concept of open prisons has unfolded a narrative that stretches from their origins in Scandinavia in the early 20th century to their legal recognition and implementation across various countries today. Open prisons began as a radical idea to transform the punitive landscape of incarceration. They emerged from a belief that environments fostering trust and responsibility could rehabilitate inmates more effectively than traditional confinement. This idea was first realized in countries like Sweden and Denmark, where the emphasis was on the prisoner's reintegration into society rather than mere isolation from it. As we traced the spread of this concept, we noted how it gained legal traction. Laws were adapted and reformed to accommodate the less restrictive, more humane approach to correction that open prisons represent. Today, these facilities operate in numerous countries, each adapting the model to its own legal and cultural contexts. Reflecting on this evolution, open prisons challenge our traditional views on punishment and rehabilitation. They underscore the importance of dignity and human rights in the criminal justice system, suggesting that the true measure of freedom isn't just about removing physical barriers, but also about creating meaningful opportunities for personal development and social reintegration. Perhaps, in redefining confinement, open prisons help us understand freedom not just as the absence of barriers, but as the presence of opportunities.